good afternoon. I think 12 o'clock it stands as afternoon, but good noon, whatever you want to say. Hope everybody's well. Thank you for joining us. So today, you probably aren't here yet. It's 15 seconds into it, so I don't expect anybody to be here yet. So 90 seconds, we'll get started. But I'm very happy today to have the ex-England hockey coach here. For me, it's a bit of a starstruck moment to have this conversation. And I'm going to try not to fanboy and talk about hockey for 15 minutes, mate, if that's all right.
Yeah, fanboy.
Hockey world doesn't really feel like that.
No.
But it's still very impressive to have you here, mate. I'm very thankful and appreciative for you giving me your time.
I don't know if it's the same, but my son, who's at Durham, my wife played international hockey as well, and they're calling him Hockey Nepo Baby.
Yeah, there's a lot of expectations on him to be very good at hockey, I guess.
He has to just enjoy it, which is the way to go. Let me tell you.
Yeah. There normally is the way to go. I feel like now there's a lot of work to go into it as well, but we'll get into that. If you are here and you are listening to us already, please say hi, get into the comments and ask some questions. But before we get going here, say hi, tell us where you're listening from. And if you want to add kind of what you're excited about from this call, then please do add that to the comments. But don't be afraid. I have this thought process or kind of belief that your questions will be better than my questions because they'll be specific to certain things. And so if you have a question for Jason, please ask the question. And if I can squeeze it into that kind of section or what we're talking about, then I will do, I promise. Will we get going, mate? You ready?
I'm ready. Go for it.
Let's do it. As I said, look, thank you for joining us. I'm excited to have this conversation looking at sport and learning from sports in regards to performance, teamwork, leadership, and how we show up at work. Ultimately, this is something I do on a regular basis in regards to how I work with clients, is bringing those lessons in. And so to have you here, being able to pull from the elite level, both from as a player and as a coach, I'm really excited for, and for us to do that. So yeah, let's get started, mate. If you can, an introduction would be amazing. Tell us who you are, what you do, but also let's build this picture to give me the story behind that international experience and the coaching experience, etc., etc.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Thanks for the invite as well. It's nice to spend some time talking about stuff. Of course, when I meet new clients, I have to introduce myself quite a lot. And even though it was a long time ago, I'm in my mid-50s now, I'm encouraged to always start that I was a double Olympian, which doesn't feel so special internally, but I know it's sort of it's a rare thing to be a double Olympian. So I played in our sport, field hockey, in the 90s. Went to the 92 Barcelona Olympics and then the 96 Atlanta Olympics. And I generally thought if you ever have the opportunity to compete at the Olympics, you should, because it's a great experience. But I was late into hockey. I was a footballer growing up, thought that was going to be my thing. My mum was third fastest 100-yard runner in athletics in the 60s before athletics turned to 100 meters. So I was quite quick as well. So, like football should have been quite easy for me, but I was one of those late developers, tiny when I was 16. And at the time in the 80s, football, you had to be a big, strong, strapping person. And I was just a weed. And so my mum, and that's the truth. If you saw me today, you'd be like, I can't imagine that, because I'm quite meaty for my height, shall we say. But my mum said, try playing hockey. So I started playing hockey relatively late, but within 3 years I was playing for the national team.
Incredible.
Which was, for me, even though it was so interesting because I kind of was a blue collar kid, but going into a white collar sport. And that sort of, that sort of change of identity. So it sort of took me to university. I was very lucky that Loughborough University offered me a spot on sports science, and that had never really been on my agenda. It's the guys that I grew up with. It's not anything we really talked about. But then in the early 90s, when I just graduated and just been to Olympics, the university offered me a job as the first full-time hockey coach in the country.
Mhm.
I think there's a few of us that claim that, but I still think I was the first full-time hockey coach in the early 90s, because even the national coaches weren't full-time back then. So I had a joyous time of working in academia, coaching a lot, and being an international player at the same time. And when that time came to an end, lottery money had started. So there was suddenly one more. Yes, perfect timing.
What you want?
Yeah. And actually, I've been lucky with my timing quite a few times. And part of kind of my fortuitous nature was that the national teams weren't doing very well, actually. And they were looking for different coaches. Coaches kept getting on the national job and then being sacked. And then literally there's nobody left with any experience or competency. So they looked to me. So I became the national coach when I was 32. By some distance, the youngest GB field hockey coach ever. And I really can't see it ever being beaten, to be honest, because it's madness to give somebody so young and so inexperienced it. But I did have 10 years of coaching experience by then. Knew the sport, been working in academia on team working, leadership, organisational design. So that led into that quite well. And then coached through 4 Olympic cycles, working both with the men's and the women, mostly the men. And we won the Europeans as well in 2009, which, you know, in men's GB and England men's hockey is the most significant achievement really in the last 30, actually it's longer now, nearly 40 years. So we did okay in that time. And then I've used all that kind of knowledge about people, teams, organisational design to work in sort of general business, but I do still have my feet very firmly in sport. And continually in people like, oh, do you not miss sport? But I feel like it's always the same subject matter. It's people doing people stuff where inevitably they have to work together, which isn't as easy as you'd have thought. Trying to achieve outcomes that are, you know, typically quite challenging and under-resourced, you know, so it's very common challenges wherever you go, I think.
Yeah, achieving problems that need people to come together and work together to achieve those problems, which is kind of similar to sport in a way, right? And sometimes in a business, you're using your brain, like your mind more so than your physical attributes to come together and do that. Although,
sorry about that. Yeah, my phone's going. Yeah, I mean, actually, I'm quite satisfied as well that even with AI, still kind of finding that a lot of the barriers, even for the use of AI, is a very human-centric one. So there's lots of work for us, people trying to help in this space, at least for now.
Yeah. So you, obviously, like the youngest ever England GB coach at 32, and I think from our conversation previously, you retired quite early from actual playing.
So yeah, I mean, it actually didn't feel that early at the time, but I went to the '98 World Cup in Utrecht in Holland, and then literally retired as I got home from that. So I actually turned 28 during the tournament.
Wow. Okay.
So, but I actually, my first cap was when I was 18. So I did have 10 years of playing. So, and actually back then 28 wasn't considered particularly early because, you know, we were doing it mostly for free. And the international calendar was becoming so full that there's a pressure of like, I can't, you know, like I need to get on with work and career. And I did feel that pressure, but actually I've only really found this out recently, but I was finding it physically so challenging. I was like actually having to break myself every single day just to keep up with the physical expectations of international sport. Turns out I've got a heart condition. And it's really only been identified in the last 5 years. And it's like, so that's why it was so difficult. Yeah, because your heart was broken. It's like, oh, blimey. Which does make me, I mean, I think resilience is right up there in terms of my capabilities. And part of it is because I used to have to push myself so hard every day. And that, unfortunately for me, and I see this actually with a lot of leaders, there's a dark side to that, you know, able to work and stick with things. And that often is the dark side isn't actually just impact on you. It's kind of the expectations that you set on people around you. So,
can I just follow that train of thought? You said, so the dark side. So when you look at the 28-year-old you, when you were in that performance side, what was the impact for you from an athlete, and how was that? What was the dark side showing up like for you?
There was definitely I mean, I was playing. I was a relatively successful international player. So, like, when I look back, it's like, well, I did play a lot, but it never felt like I was secure.
Fine.
And I wouldn't. Yeah, probably in a workplace setting, you say, yeah, that's imposter syndrome. Yeah, actually, probably was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like, so I was always like desperately trying to find ways to get better.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't solve it by physically just being better because I was physically struggling so much, but it was so fundamental that you did have to work hard.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember, you know, like, I wouldn't say I was striving. I was desperate to find ways of just, you know, being good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And the expectation with selection being so prevalent, right? And if a team didn't do well, we lost funding as well. So there was team pressure, let alone selection pressure. And I, unfortunately, when I look back, I don't think I enjoyed it. You know,
Okay.
and because for me there's no sense of enjoyment, even though I'm still connected with quite a lot of the colleagues from back then. I'm not really that proud of it either. It didn't feel that purposeful for me, you know, like it was just so difficult day in, day out. Bizarrely, I was a player coach in the club world, and because I had more authority, more connection, more belonging and everything, I really enjoyed sort of in fact, the best I ever performed is when I left international arena, bizarrely. And, you know, what I know today about sort of intrinsic motivators versus extrinsic one, you know, like when I was playing internationally, just like the extrinsic orientation the whole time. How am I being judged? What's my times? You know, how many goals am I scoring? You know, like that. And because they felt quite beyond my ability, how dark that felt day in, day out. And then, you know, the solution was just to keep trying harder, just pushing more, you know. And I was so grateful when I retired. I thought, thank God for that, you know. Although the strange thing was then we had this new thing, which is when your identity transfers, like that's a new problem. That was much more of a problem than I foresaw, because suddenly it's like, oh yeah, I actually quite liked people thinking I was an elite athlete, you know, and I looked good. And I mean, I say that today. If you know, I mean, I'm still physically quite active, but I don't have to push myself. I'm 20 kilograms heavier than I was then, but I'm 20 heavier because that's my shape. So I was basically, you know, like I was basically beasting myself just to be super light, you know, just to get by. And so like when I found it difficult to transfer into the new identity, it's like, wow, that was horrible. I hated it, but still what I felt like I was valued as.
Yeah.
It's funny times. I mean, I learned so much about the human orientation through that time.
Yeah, I find the identity thing here. Well, look, imagine being 6'4" and 105 kilos, Jason. Try running around the hockey pitch then. At least I'm not doing it at that level. It would have been a lot harder, I can imagine.
Yeah, well, I'm a similar weight, but I'm much shorter, so I'm happy in economy flights, whereas you must be crippled.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm definitely not. Extra leg room. Have you seen the comment from Kimberly just saying hi, Kimberly? Thanks for joining us. I want to just quickly look at if you were to look back and kind of a performance when you were performing both as a player and as a coach at that elite level. How would you say your definition of performance has gone from now, what that was, and now where it is now, looking back with all of this experience and this knowledge around performance from a work stand? How do you see those two different titles of performance?
Well, I see this in a lot of people today, and I saw it in my own personal journey. I saw it in my journey of coaching. It's very, very difficult to really perform if you're not in a flow state, right? And the flow state is really when there's simplicity and clarity in what I'm thinking. You know, so much of my experience as an athlete back then was total confusion, and you know, like so many things that I wanted and needed to be better at, but wasn't sure how to do it. Whereas we know, like a sort of flow state is where I have got clarity on what it is that I need to achieve. And if the world is so complex and and changing, well, then just seek the clarity within that. Like whether in sport, that's often not what's the tactics or technique that I need. It's like what's the principle or what's the value, for example. I remember sort of managing to navigate a difficult time playing when I just decided I'd do it to make sure my mum felt okay about me doing it. I remember saying, "Yeah, do it for your mum." And so it's whatever that gives people that sort of clarity. And I see in the workplace a lot of subject matter expert leaders, because they understand it, but they struggle to then provide clarity for those around them. So I do think that's one of the things I really see is like, regardless how complex and uncertain and ambiguous the environment is, can we still create a sense of clarity in that? And I think Einstein, there's a very famous Einstein quote about, if you can't say it simply, you don't understand it very well. And I do think that for myself, like when I became a coach of myself as an athlete, when I realized the job was actually just to give myself clarity and simplicity. And then to know everything will be okay. Like I'd say on a daily basis, like people go, really, this is just sport, or it's just selling crisps, or it's just, actually, I mean, I think I heard one of the England women's cricketers who's preparing for the T20 World Cup that England are hosting at home. She was sort of saying, I just got to remember it's just cricket, and there are some disciplines that are life and death, but the vast majority aren't. And actually just to allow yourself to be comfortable in that.
Yeah. Kimberly just said a huge difference between performing and belonging. Yeah, for sure. When you look back at your time, you said you struggled with it. In fact, you didn't enjoy it. And then you've just given me this example of what performance is, in finding clarity and flow state, right? If you were to now be in the coach you are with all of this, what advice would you give that younger, I guess, athlete, but then coach as well?
Well, I quite like this. I mean, Andy Grant's new book, which I read on holiday, I think it was a book really talking about like developing expertise, right? Which is effectively what we're all striving for. How do I get better and know more, be able to do more about it? And he uses the term about confident humility. And so where I see a lot of people lacking confidence is actually where the thing they're trying to achieve is too inauthentic to what they are capable of achieving. It's too big a step, too much difference. I mean, I remember thinking, like, striving to be like, it's a made up name, but as an athlete, striving to be like Russell, because everybody said how good Russell was, and he scored lots of goals and was good at dribbling, right? And I never really got confident in the image of trying to be like Russell. But actually, what I realized, unfortunately, slightly later in my athletic career, was I kind of confident really in the version of me, the best version of me, actually. And unfortunately, some of the stuff I was really good at wasn't the things that typically got noticed by a spectator or by the newspaper, like great work ethic, used to link the play very well, used to set up a lot of goals, was incredibly adaptable. You could move me anywhere on the pitch, right? Things that typically aren't front and center to the things that we're to recognize, but the confidence to actually just try and be the best version of me, I think is quite useful. And it tends to mean that people look in rather than out, which again, I think is quite useful. And the humility part, that confident humility, is actually also to know that maybe there's people that are better than me. Almost inevitably are. That actually we all struggle to get better. The things that we can't currently do, but it doesn't mean we're not going to keep trying, but still doesn't mean we might achieve it. And but it is the balance between the two. I tended to be too humble because I couldn't be confident. But actually, I think in the workplace, when people start to be able to manage both, and we know both topics are quite well researched, So there's great guidance for people. When coaches, I help a lot of coaches, executive and sporting. I quite often find that they're trying to be confident without actually having done enough work. So one of the characteristics of confidence or expertise is that you are doing work to learn the discipline, understand the discipline. The humility part of that journey is, yes, but you can't do that alone. So who do you ask? Where do you go for the people around you that can inform and give feedback? Be vulnerable about that. So I think most progress, again, I found this too late, is actually with others. And I used to be a quite independent young person, used to sort of think that was a great sign, but it stopped me actually asking for help, looking for help, because the image of the great person rather than the sort of person that could really be helped and then in return help others.
Yeah, I like that. I like the confidence piece. I use an example when I talk to clients of Rory McIlroy. Is a great golfer, right? But he's probably very confident. There's probably moments where he's not confident, right? But if you ask him to play left-handed, he wouldn't be very confident. But if you give him 4 years to play left-handed, he would feel more confident because he would go out and practice and actually try it and do the thing that he needs to do. It's that obviously the practice part, which else, it's the proof to self, the fact that I can do things well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Rory's quite. I mean, my wife's Northern Irish. My mother's-in-law is obviously Northern Irish. Golf's in their blood. They know Rory when he was growing up. They know his coaches, significant others, and I think fair to say one of the things that Rory struggled with is his complexity of his thoughts, and I mean, he particularly used to suffer when there's so many people he felt like he was trying to perform for. Everybody thought he'd win the British Open, for those who remember, that was held in Northern Ireland in Port. What's the golf course? His golf course.
Yeah.
Can't remember what it is now, but and unfortunately, just slumped. And we do see that so often in performance, where people are just overthinking it. It's like a flow state is like, just having a go and doing it and not being too concerned by too many things, like controlling the controllables and it is a human thing. That is not just a sport thing. That's a human thing.
I've been pretty lucky with some of my training. I've been able to train and work with one of the British weightlifting coaches, an ex-British Olympic lifter. So Olympic weightlifting, and I remember him saying something along these lines: the best lifters aren't the smartest people, because the smartest people overthink the lift, whereas the people who don't think as much just lift and they just go through the motion. And so it feels like it really resonates with what you're saying. Actually, the complexity in the thought is where we can also sometimes mess up.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of what we do in sport and in the workplace is kind of just like a reaction to stuff, right? And if we have to think everything like that, firstly, we'd be so burnt out by lunchtime that we wouldn't want to come back the next day. But our brain can't work that fast as well. So, what actually just allows us to sort of have clarity in the moment. Part of that is to practice, bizarrely. And that's one of the joys of sport that I think often in sport that we don't recognize is we practice 95% for 5% performance. Yes, the practice mentality is inherent, but in the workplace, it's it's probably worse. You perform 99% in 1% practice. So it's no surprise that people often feel worn out and burnt out, because it's like everything is a new skill. It's being tested all the time. Whereas like we know that great performance needs great practice. And great practice means failing at that, but failing when it's safe and okay, and then learning from that because it felt okay to fail, and next time I'm better, rather than so often in the performance arena. It's like, if you fail here, you don't get a second chance, so the pressure that brings is quite significant.
It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because sport, we do create a 90 to 95% opportunity to practice, and then within that probably fail. How do you, I think when I go to the workplace, you go, well, they're not doing that, and it's difficult. How do you support that? How do you get companies to think about practice and encourage that? And what do you do, or what have you seen people do in workplaces create practice, or especially leaders who are under more time pressure?
Yeah, I think, like let's pick a meeting scenario, for example, that when leaders with their teams go into a meeting scenario and it's entirely focused on performance, what we typically see is that the leader takes over, is the voice, is the brain, because can't possibly risk to get this wrong, tend to repeat that pattern over and over again. Whereas actually, if we're going with more of a practice mentality, we actually, what you see is there's more delegation of voice. There's more of an embracing of what might be a different way of thinking this, so the kind of the acceptance of risk stroke failure in the kind of the outcome of that is kind of embraced a little bit. And so you tend to see, there's just odd, it's just okay not to be absolutely super polished. So we actually accept that we can fit in some practice or some development opportunities into every opportunity, right? I mean, it's clearly challenging. I mean, I wouldn't always say you'd be doing that with your clients, right? Because there's less acceptance of failure there. But then, okay, can we practice that elsewhere? I feel like I'm obsessed by trying to give voice to the people around me that are in this sort of that more of a development frame, to get my expertise, my knowledge, my decades of work, to actually bring it, get it out of the way for others to have the opportunity to practice their art. And I mean, in a workplace setting, with the people I work alongside, young people, I'm fascinated how fast that they progress. When actually I get out of their way and provide the opportunity to. I know some colleagues find that difficult because they go, "Oh, Jason, they've not done this before. They don't know. They're nervous." Like, yeah, but how can we help that change, right? And then, and a lot of that is talking before, scaffolding. So the challenge is just on the edge of doable, not long way beyond it. So where do we help? Where do I step in? And then sort of doing a debrief, like classic performance orientations, which is, let's discuss it before we get there. Let's have a plan for it. Let's make sure the plan for it is, not beyond us. A little bit of plan A, plan B. If it really goes wrong, I'll step in, and then let's learn from it in a debrief conversation afterwards. That is the classic sporting setting cycle. Whereas, and particularly since COVID, it's like, don't have time for that because in a minute I've got to be in another meeting. And the back-to-back nature of that performing in every meeting. And I would say that of all the executive coaching, I think the most common outcome for this is don't have meetings back-to-back. Schedule time for the brief debrief, even if it's for yourself, rather than that just sense of perform, which is so tiring, isn't it? By the way,
exhausting. I keep playing in the back of my head going, okay, so how did you create that space from a sporting standpoint? Or is this something that you've maybe latched onto more now as you've gone more into this kind of coaching space?
I mean, I still even in a sporting place, I think it's easy because it's in the environment, right? There are some coaches still that don't really understand that, so a sense of success from a training session is that they do really well. And there's an awful lot of supporting literature now in a sporting setting. If they do something really well, then you really haven't made it a training experience, a developmental experience, because you want it to be just beyond their capability. Now, sometimes we actually want them to do it really well because we're in an actual kind of confirmation period or building confidence, like evidence that I can do this. But so often we want to make sure that actually it's just beyond what they can do, or it's confusing, but we're helping them really, really get great at practicing, which is observing myself, not being obsessed by kind of the external judgments, sitting with them, what you can control, being okay to try things, but try things aligned to what a good outcome is. So, when coaches, particularly in a training setting, shouting too much, solving the problem, you know, or making it incredibly competitive, you versus them the whole time, which just becomes judgment rather than development. There's lots of things that I think you can see people understand in that performance setting. You see them and then develop it in a workplace setting, but not always, strangely. I've seen some great workplace people that think you should shout in a sporting setting because they've seen other coaches, you know, aggressively shouting. It's not, you know, and I quite often say, like, no, just, you know, when you're developing others in the workplace, it's the same thing. It's just with a, you know, a stick and a ball, or a swimming pool, or a vault, or something like that.
Yeah, such a good awareness. I'm going to. I remember this session. I don't know why, but I kept messing up as a kid. It must be 10 years ago, right? Maybe even a bit longer ago when I got back from Australia. I just kept messing up and going, I can't do this. I can't do this. But then we did the drill the next week, and actually, my brain had worked and processed through the drill, and actually the next week I was fine. I could perform at that drill, and it just connects so much with what you've just said. And I'm like, now why have I not put that together a little bit more in regards to maybe some of the lessons you do learn as a coach, but as you kind of get into this space, like, actually, this is exactly what I should have been doing. Why was I so hard on myself?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a similar sort of example. So yesterday I was working with this team that they were asked to present back to the CEO at the end of the day. And we built in time for them to prepare for the presentation. One person's topic was quite challenging, and they were quite nervous about it, and then would sort of ask me for sort of coaching support, and they would say, they just said, I'm not getting it, right? And then anxiety was starting to go through the roof. We had plenty of time. I didn't personally feel like it was going to be a problem, and they did deliver great, you know, they really did well later in the day. But similar to your point, Rich, to kind of what helped them was that they went for a walk, left everything, and it was and just went, you know, like went to walk, not and the brain just does all its magic in the background, you know. And then suddenly they came back with like an epiphany. It's like, oh, now I've got it, you know. And it was just being left to have that time for the brain to navigate it. I mean, we see this in the gym, right? We don't build muscle in the gym whilst we're doing the exercise. We build it overnight as we're sleeping, you know. So it's, and we learned this actually in Olympic sports when we got lottery funding, that all those people that were training and then rushing back to work or rushing from work to training, most of the athletes didn't actually train more, strangely. When they were doing it full time, they just were much more effective in their rest, you know, in the downtime, you know, so the recovery was so much more effective. And well, I certainly, you know, when I got a little bit of lottery money, so I was able to do it more full time, I definitely didn't train more because I couldn't, like, physically. I was broken anyway. But to the ability to sort of rest and recover, or contemplate it, or review it, that was the real performance game.
Yeah, really. Yes, I love that. That's a very interesting piece there, right? When you went to full time, that you didn't train more, you just rested more.
Yeah, I mean, we had more meetings, but they weren't onerous, right? And we did more activities to try and help performance, but they weren't like physically, you know, weren't playing more hockey, wasn't running more. It was kind of more diverse, you know, and you know, allowing the brain and the body to kind of make the adaptations to then go again, and that does take time.
Yeah, kind of leans back to that piece there talks back about the importance of the game happens in the brain first, right? And so that you walk it through with the drills, with the practice, then it just begins to knit everything together, I guess, and just that reiteration of what we do versus what we know and how we put that together.
Yeah.
Ian's asked, got a reflection here. Ian Lawson, great to see you again, Jason. Let me see if I can share this. There we go. Great to see you again, Jason. A challenge in the workplace is 90% complete mode. Mistakes can have serious repercussions. In sport, the 95% plus training provides a safety net to fail and learn without the consequences. So it'd be interesting to see how Jason's thoughts are on that. Over to you, mate.
Yeah, well, I feel like I talked to that subject quite a lot, but I mean, thank you, Ian. Hi, how you doing? I think that consequences thing is so interesting.
Hmm.
You know, I've seen leaders give their younger developing colleagues opportunity for stuff, and then say maybe do a pitch in front of a client,
Hmm.
and not gone as well as the leader would have hoped, right?
Hmm.
And then there's the pivotal choice,
Hmm.
right? How does the leader then respond to the person that they gave the opportunity?
Hmm.
If the consequence of a slightly suboptimal performance is like a devastating traumatic experience, getting shouted at, um, good luck for that to be a development opportunity. Good luck if you think that person really fancies doing it again.
Hmm.
You can still provide really quite um, purposeful challenge to what better looks like, but it can be delivered in a way that actually the person is quite grateful for it. Thank you for that. Maybe doesn't like it, didn't enjoy it, but they're much more able to then actually learn from it and then go again. I mean, this is almost a definition of the empathetic leader.
Hmm.
Really understanding how I am now with them, as Ian put in the chat, the consequence of that
Hmm.
failure.
Hmm.
Um, not to say that in a sporting setting we do sometimes deliberately amplify the consequences in a
Hmm.
safe place, but that is to try and practice the mental skill, the mental capability, the mental strength to actually recognize that that's not enough, that's not effective for me. So then I'm just going to thank you, but park it. So
Hmm.
how I appraise that criticism, but that's quite a high level
Hmm.
mental capability, which some young people bring, right? There are some young people, um, the nature of their upbringing or their personality, which is often developed from an early age. They are typically quite robust, resilient anyway.
Hmm.
I work with a young person like that, and they go, "Stop telling me what I'm good at. Just get on to what makes me better," right?
Yeah.
But they are very robust, and it's been a learnt journey for
Hmm.
that. And I've certainly seen, but that approach is one that you want to check is going to be okay first before leading with that type of
Hmm.
consequences, as Ian said.
Yeah, but when you talk about consequences, the response of um, the shouting, and then I connect that to I haven't got time to then come out of the stress zone to think like a coach and think empathetically. I'm in meeting to meeting, so that was rubbish. Uh, Shout, shout, shout. Let's move on to the
Yeah,
next one. There's no space, as you said. If you can actually create space to debrief, think about it, and then respond as a leader,
yeah.
how impactful that could be.
Yeah. Well, I mean, almost on a monthly basis, I wouldn't say it's super common, but on a monthly basis, when I'm sort of coaching senior leaders or helping groups, a lot of the problems they've come about is when actually there was in the moment, emotional response that they actually regret.
Hmm.
They knew they could do it a different way. And actually, most people appreciate that. I would say it's actually when I'm so caught up in the moment, the pressure's on, time is tight,
Hmm.
that people fall into that. And I did some work with I've done a lot of work with the police, and for a while there was a really frightening stat, which was some leaders are spending 50% of their working week on discipline issues,
Hmm.
often between staff.
Hmm.
And it's often the nature of the pressured environment, right, where they knew that they shouldn't have been, but the
Hmm.
pressure was so intense on the moment that they kind of found it hard to manage themselves. So
Hmm.
both to try and find them some space or other ways to mitigate emotional responses, but also to help them sort of be more aware of the potential pattern to respond in a way that they'd prefer not to. So what are they doing in advance? What's their skill set in the moment to actually make sure they do work in a way that they'd be proud of as they reflect back to? So I very rarely come across anybody that thought an inappropriate interaction with a colleague was actually something they meant to do,
Yeah.
something they just fell into, in the moment.
I talk a lot, more of an awareness point, right? I bring up the Shin paradox a lot in coaching. as an awareness, like, well, this is the emotional side of the brain responding compared to, like, as you just said, the way we would actually probably want to respond logically and human, like from a human standpoint. And I think that when you begin to bring that emotion, you go, okay, so how then do we come out of that emotional response? How do we calm this chimp, which is our emotional response to things? And I think I like how that's connected to this conversation.
Yeah, I was lucky in the London Olympic cycle. That's Steve Peters, Professor Steve Peters' Chimp Paradox book. I highly recommend it if you have time to read it. He worked with us, with some of our athletes, and you know, he gave some of that guidance. And I thought, oh, it's so nice of him to share it with me. And then I read it was in his book, so you know, like I could have read it in his book. But a lot of that sort of understanding that the part of our brain is so compelled to be angry, to be emotional in the moment. And that's good for us because it's kept us alive as a species. But maybe in a lot of settings, actually, that first response isn't that helpful. But you can't just say, "Don't be like that." You know, actually,
you've got to work hard in learning skills to tame it a little bit.
Yeah, and it's funny, as I feel like I've tamed my method, you know, like my mental chimp, as it would be, over so much over the years. One of the things I fear for myself is like I'm just a bit apathetic now. You know, it's like I'd like to have that sort of emotive response that makes me feel like, yeah, no, this is something that's so, you know, when I really want to make sure it's important. And I've very rarely been like that, and I do wonder whether I'm missing an opportunity to just be more passionate about some things sometimes. And I'm so trained to quieten that, you know, that mindset. I'm probably okay with it, but I do just wonder, you know, I do see some success come from that. Some positive outcomes from when the thing kind of erupts because it needed to. I mean, actually, now, if my wife was here, she's like, yeah, you keep things so under wraps for so long, and then it doesn't work. But then it's like, why didn't you say something? And I you know, again, I'm probably overtrained myself to stay calm about stuff when actually, yeah, I should say it. Just be more chimp about it and say
it. Yeah, I love that. I was going to say, I can imagine if you've got kids and they're like, oh, when dad's mad, he's proper mad. You know, you've pissed him off.
Yeah, no, well, no, I'm the calm one in our house. For sure.
I love it. Yeah. We've spoken a lot about performance, spoken a lot about different things that impact performance. What are the biggest challenges you see to successful leadership, leaders? Yeah, I know we've spoken about bits offline, so it'd be interesting to see if you bring those up for us.
Well, I mean, I've got my personal theories about, you know, what does success performance look like, and I've always fallen for that. You know, true high performance is long-term sustainable success, growth. And I mean, and the world is pushing us to achieve quicker, better with less all the time. I think there's enough evidence to sort of suggest that chasing mentality might get it to you today, but you're going to lose it for the future. And I'd say most people in an elite sports setting would actually say what actually makes you much better at something is the consistency of approach. You know, it's the turning up regularly and doing it rather than the pushing super hard in the moment. I'm kind of laughing because some of the things we used to do in our early 20s, you know, like I remember having a county cross country race on the Sunday, and that sort of chase mentality. I thought I'll practice it on the Saturday as well. You know, and you know, that sort of, now I've got to do lots of it now to achieve. And I remember having like some hockey teams that I coached early in my 20s, like we'd have the big final on the Wednesday, the university Wednesday, you know, it's like, and suddenly everybody wants to train Monday and Tuesday, you know, and it definitely made them worse, even if they felt more kind of engaged with it. And unfortunately, a couple of times people got bloody injured on the Tuesday, so couldn't play in the big game on the Wednesday. But I mean, I've always felt like, you know, like it's the long, consistent growth, understanding it's still turbulent rather than the got to be great today. And the inevitable cost of that, like we're seeing a lot of burnout and all of its manifestations in the workplace, which is that real chase mentality, even though there's a lot of compelling research. I mean, I think you might have said in the notes to this, I was so fortunate to do some work with some nurses in the NHS. And I mean, they're so impressive, and they're seeing life or death on the wards all the time, right? And so the compelling desire to chase saving people. But actually the program helped them to understand the value of like briefing at the beginning of the day as a team, and then a debrief at the end of the day. It's like, yeah, but we're wasting time for sort of saving people. But what they found was like the relatively short amount of prep at the beginning of the day kind of just meant that they were better aligned with each other, shared resources more. They were setting themselves up to be better able to get through the day, not kind of crash emotionally by lunchtime. And the debrief at the end of the day was quite interesting as well, because the debrief kind of allowed them to decompress together, have closure on the day, so they weren't ruminating about it overnight, so that closure allowed them to be more consistent the next morning. So I've been searching for that, but I do think success with a long-term orientation, consistency rather than sort of day-to-day greatness is what gets you a long way.
And I think I like that debrief and how you explained it with the nurses, right? Because you spoke about humility earlier on, the confident humility. So actually being able to speak through maybe some of the things we haven't done well as well, and actually then you're having that kind of conversation together as a group. I just felt like I led the connection there, as you said at the beginning, around performance.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, in a sort of a hospital setting, we know that there's a lot of work now. I've actually got a colleague that works with surgical teams on how well they work as a team, right? And it's quite robustly known that the natural hierarchical orientation in a surgical setting actually caused some problems, because the reluctance to kind of criticize up the leadership ranks, as it were, but actually that humility from everybody to kind of accept mistakes and provide in the moment feedback is actually life-changing in that environment. But again, what allows you not to be so caught up on your rank, your hierarchy, it is mostly that sort of sense of long-term success, rather than being really great and seen to be great now. There's some of the people I respect the most, and I think are generally most respected. It's fascinating how you can see how. I was at a Premier League event on Thursday for mentors, and there was quotes from the mentees, so Premier League coaches, about what they valued in the mentors, and it was amazing how often that the mentees are like really grateful that the mentor had sort of talked about where they'd gone wrong in their careers. The stuff that really was landing with them was when they had made mistakes, rather than this is what I'm so great at and all the stuff that I actually know, which again is that sense of actually I can see myself keeping going at this, rather than I don't know, I could possibly be that good, so it's so you can deconstruct it into something that feels like I can keep going at. It's doable.
I really want to ask that question. So, what's your biggest mistake that you've learned from as a coach from elite level?
I suppose early on, so when I was 32, the GB team wasn't doing that great. We were under a lot of pressure to qualify for the Athens Olympics 2004. The women's team had failed to qualify for that Olympics, and so we had our qualification event, and there was a huge amount of pressure on the sport, because if both teams hadn't qualified for that, the funding cuts would have been appalling. They were devastating anyway. So I think we had an 80% funding cut after that Olympics. We did make it, but some of the things that I kind of thought were the ways, I remember saying to the team, it's like, I know we're not doing that well, but it makes no sense to sort of rest, so we've got to push harder.
Okay,
I,
yeah.
mean, I know we've sort of talked about that quite a lot today, but the ignorance of that, it sounded great as I said it. It's like, yeah, be tougher, be harder, work more. And then watch for the next 2 months in preparation where we started to decline. Luckily, we spotted it, and sort of realised how stupid that was. And then something else that really, again, early on, like selection for an Olympics is a big thing, right? People put a lot of time and effort into it, like it's a rare opportunity, so how scarce it is makes it so much more important. And I remember assuming that they'd all want to be told about selection the way that I wanted to be told, right? When I was a player. So I kind of sort of was bumbling like, yeah, so we'll do the selection announcement like this, because nobody likes it like this. And a few of the players went, no, I don't like it like that. And I remember thinking, wow. So because I didn't want to be told in a public setting. I wanted an email so that I could receive it and take it in as I wanted. Now, they wanted it face to face. I was like, wow, you want it you want that face to face? Yeah, because I want to sort of understand it and be told it, and I want the opportunity in the moment. And I was the complete opposite to that. And I suppose I've spent a lot of my life like spotting where people actually are different. And then how do we, create environments where, we help people be the best that they can be with, being different, right? And then there's inevitable things like how different can we actually make it to be inclusive for everybody here? And I think that's an ongoing debate. But early on, where I suppose in the 90s we were kind of indoctrinated to the singular image of what good looked like, and I think I spent every year since providing evidence that that's not the way. Even though I'm academically orientated, so we have standard deviations. The average person and a theory to be valid has to be for most people, but there still are these gits that are outliers, right? And unfortunately, I think I was often one of those outliers, and in the real setting, theory is just the start point. It's very rarely the thing that covers every need, every person. So, yeah, I remember the sort of stupidity of that. But bizarrely being with another team who wanted it all the same because they wanted it all to be fair and equal, and then being equally like, no, you much prefer it to be individualized. No, listen to me, listen to us, Jason. We all want it at the same time because we value that fairness of approach rather than the individualization of it. It's like, yeah, be careful what I think is the truth, because it might not be in this context.
I really like that little lesson there. I'm trying to see how that works to situational and people aware leadership, right?
Yeah,
I think it's so vital.
Well, I see it. I challenge it when I hear it in a sports setting. Oh, I really know my athletes. I really know my players. No, you don't. Yeah, I'm 56. I don't really know myself yet, and I'm different than I was 5 years ago. But we can be curious about people, and we can seek to understand and observe much more. I mean, my wife and I joke. Unfortunately for my wife, she's going through with menopause at the moment. And she had breast cancer a few years ago, so she can't have HRT. So it's tough for her, right? And it's so interesting to see how the hormonal balance really does affect her mood. And I do my damnedest to adjust to be the person that she needs me, given what's going on for her in the moment. Often that is, don't be anywhere.
Don't come home.
Don't say a word. Don't watch that TV. Don't eat. Don't breathe. But like the sort of point is like we're both kind of observant of each other to see how we can help, because we're not necessarily the same as we were yesterday. And I find that really interesting. How do we keep helping people for where they are now, and not fall for the assumptions that they should be this because they were that previously. And yeah,
I love that. Ian just added here, I agree with Jason. High performance has to be sustainable. Let me put on here as well. Has to be sustainable, viewed through the lens that are very few high performance individuals, teams, and organizations. Certainly far fewer than believe or say they're high performing or have a high performance culture. Thanks, Ian. Look, I wanted to talk about. I know you've got a story in regards to analysis paralysis, but I know we've got 5 minutes, and so if you wouldn't mind quickly sharing that, quickly touch on it, because I think it's important. And the reason why I think it's important is because one of the biggest challenges I see is just communication, and I think it just hits the story perfectly on the head. So if you could quickly share that.
Well, and not entirely what you want, but I think I'll bastardize. There's an old colleague of mine, David Passmore, who's currently the head coach of the US women's field hockey team. Dave's long-term experience in coaching and academia. He's worked a long way around the globe, but he's got this experience in America about American sporting culture, which is that because of NFL, American football, basketball, they tend to be quite coach-led because they do drills and they run plays, and so most of the work is done by the coaches to figure out what plays the athlete should do. About in NFL, Dave Passmore was saying, because he's embedded in American sporting culture at the moment, it's like in NFL that really it's only the quarterback that's allowed to have much thinking. A couple of players in a play might have a choice. And he was saying that he really had to change how he approached coaching field hockey in America, because he's very player-centered, principally based, because he wants the players to be able to react in the moment and feel some sense of agency, autonomy. But the culture over there is basically do what you're told from the playbook, so there's a huge amount of analysis. And what tends to happen, Dave says, is that a lot in that setting, the players get bombarded by like information and options, and then they typically ask back saying, so what are the one or two things I should do? And spend most of the day being bombarded by information. I think maybe the story I shared with you before is that I've been places in America in a sporting setting where the tactical stuff is so advanced, it's like, wow, and the number of hours that's gone into it, and then the opposition changed formation and then we've got 5 minutes to completely redo it. Desperately hoping, actually, can you players just figure it out, because we haven't got enough time to do all that analysis. And I'm a fan of data, but I'm a fan of continuous improvement orientation to data, which is collect all the data you can, but really only share the stuff that makes a difference. And cognitive load theory, which is basically people can't cope with too much stuff, and then sort of just keep it to those key outcomes.
The story which I remember you told me last time was the coaches coming together to talk about why that person made that pass, and then and then the story is actually we made all these assumptions, we didn't, and then you by a passing moment you asked that person, it was nothing in comparison to the 5 hours worth of deliberation.
So all the people observing and made all these assumptions and tactical analysis of why this player chose to do this certain thing, and I was like, maybe we should ask them, but we're so indoctrinated that we do the decision making and the analysis. And then I just bumped into the players and we were 4 hours chatting about that choice of yours. Went, oh, just got my studs caught in the turf, didn't mean to do it at all. It's like, wow, it's just somebody that thought to ask the person at the source of the information rather than the analytical observations. But
and that was the kind of the key thing that stand out for me, is like the assumptions we make and the fact that communication is so simple, and that would have easily led to the right answer, and just getting feedback is not potentially the speediest thing we can do. Jason, I've really enjoyed this. Thank you for your time. I think it's enjoyable seeing you reflect and think about those lessons and previous moments in your career as well. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time. I really thank you again.
Thanks for the chat, Rich, and the invitation. Appreciate it.
If you stay where you're at, everybody else, session next week is with Ian Morrison looking at AI in workplace cultures. So be a really interesting one. Thank you for the guys listening and adding your insights as well. I really appreciate that too. Have a lovely weekend and speak to you all soon.